Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, well, aging. What does it mean to own your aging? In this episode, we discuss the actions we can take to start, stop, and continue the actions we take that affect our successful aging. All right, so Corbin, you know I'm a fan of Jim Harshaw Jr. and his Success Through Failure podcast. In fact, we had Jim Harshaw Jr. on, I forget which episode it was, but one of the earlier episodes in the podcast, and interviewed him. In one of his recent episodes, episode 392, which was with five-time cancer survivor Bill Potts, one of the things that they talked about, it came up in the podcast, was this idea of owning your failures. And it got me thinking about this podcast and the message we're sharing, and the idea of owning your aging got stuck in my head. What do you think about having a conversation about this topic?
So what does that mean, owning your aging?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit different to everybody, but for me, it means taking responsibility for aging well. And that's, again, what we promote on this podcast is doing the things that are going to help you to age well. So what do you think own your aging would mean?
I think that it would mean to embrace it. I mean, we all are going to age. We can't go back in time. We're obviously moving forward. So embrace it and embrace what you have, but don't be defeated by it. I think there's a stigma or a mindset of, oh, I'm old, I'm decrepit, I'm dying. And that's not true. You can actually live even though you're aging. And that's kind of what we talk about is there's a way to age well. There's a way to age successfully. There's a way to, not just age and be old and let it defeat you, but age and embrace it and still continue to live life, but live life to the fullest.
I think I tend to differentiate between being old and being older. For me, I'm coming up on 60 and I don't consider that old. I'm doing some of the things now that I've never been able to do in the past. I think I'm stronger and a little bit more fit than I've been in the last decade or so. And it's not that I have not put the effort in the past. It's just I've allowed myself to continue to progress toward that. And so I think to me also the idea of own your aging is taking on more personal responsibility for how you age and not just being dependent upon the idea of, and this will come up in a future podcast, the idea of a default aging, where we just, I retire and I'm supposed to just decline. And so that, I'll try and slow that decline as best I can, but, it's expected that I'm going to get old. I'm going to, see, like we talk about with what the exercise physiology textbook tells us, that from the age of 25 to 50, we're going to lose 10% of our muscle mass. And from 50 to 80, we lose an additional 40%, which I call bullshit because that's really just a matter of your inactivity. And I refuse to lose the muscle mass that is expected for me as I age.
Yeah, I think it's also a mindset too, because you say that you're 60, and that's not too far away from that early bird special, the senior citizen discount, if you think about it. But when I look at you and I interact with you, or I listen to you talk, or I see you move, I don't picture an elderly man. I don't picture you to be a senior citizen.
I don't think 60 is elderly.
No, but that as a society, people think that, right? People see that. But that's not the case. I mean, even when I was personal training, you'd get people in your classes that were 74, 75, 76, and they're really just picking up heavier weights. They have more endurance. They're more active than even some of the 22-year-olds. I mean, they're running laps around them. So I do think that there's a stigma being attached to, the older I get, I'm not as active, but you can be active and you can be just as youthful as you were in your youth, right? It's kind of a mindset.
It just gave me the thought that, when I was in my late teens, I was always, hoping to not get carded. And then, once you got older and older and stuff, you start appreciating when you go out and, you go to a bar or something like that, or you order a drink at a restaurant and the waiter asks you for ID because, it's okay, I still look young. Well, now I think, I no longer really get, carded for buying alcohol or anything like that. But my goal now, I guess, is to start getting carded when I go to get those AARP benefits or, senior benefits when you go to the movies or a restaurant or something like that. So, oh, sir, I have to see your ID. I don't believe you're over 60. Oh, well, here it is. Yeah. So that might be a way of me owning my aging, is to have to, make the people card me to say you are in fact old as you think you say you are. Any other thoughts on kind of own your aging, what you think it means?
No, I think that's it. I think it's just, let's just not own and accept the fact that we're getting older, but we're aging with a purpose, right? We're more maturing, or we're maturing better. We're aging well.
Another thing that I like to consider when I talk about kind of owning your aging, and this is a concept that, I was first introduced to as an undergrad, and it's something that I've continued to try and teach my students more as like a philosophy of how we interact with the healthcare system, how we interact with the world, really. And that's the tragedy of the commons. I think we've probably mentioned that before on the podcast, where the idea of the commons is that you have this common land that the farmers, ranchers, or whatever can, if they each put one cow on, it's sustainable. And generally, most people will act to be responsible and maintain that. But then there's that push that if I just put one more cow or sheep on this field, it's not going to significantly impact the sustainability of the commons. And if it does, that detrimental effect is going to be dispersed among everybody. So it has minimal effect on me. And so, invariably people are going to put one more on there. Well, then, you put one on and I put one on, and then everybody starts putting more on. And all of a sudden the commons is overwhelmed and can't be maintained. And the original premise of this was, it was this article written by Jared Harden back in I believe it's 68. So it's an older article, but it was dealing much more with the growing population, which at that point, I think population was approaching 5 billion. And there was this feeling that if the population continues to grow, the earth isn't going to be able to sustain it. And we have to think about these renewable resources and non-renewable resources and everything else. And so it was based off of that, but I've taken it to project it into like healthcare a lot more. And when we look at our current healthcare system, as we are aging, we're having an increasing number of aging individuals. People are not as active and as healthy as they should be. That puts increasing strain on our healthcare system. And so to me, when I talk about owning my aging or owning your aging, I'm also talking about what is our responsibility to society to be healthy and to age well. I discussed my epigenetics test with TruDiagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
Wow. It's really deep.
I don't know if it's that deep.
No, I mean, but no one really thinks about that, right? They just, they're, like I said, there's kind of a mindset, and for lack of a better words, people are kind of selfish about that. Oh, well, how does this affect me? Not how does this affect the society around me?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm aging, I'm getting older, I'm about to retire. It's my health, but it's not necessarily your health, because you going to a doctor, you're taking time away from another individual who maybe has significantly worse health issues than you and really needs to go and see that doctor, but you're taking that time away from them just because you have it in your head that you're older and you have to go see a doctor. But does that make sense what I'm saying? Because
it does in a way, but I mean,
it's like a trickle down effect.
I mean, there is that responsibility to go for your regular checkups and be taking care of your health, and doing the things that the doctor says. Okay, your blood pressure's a little bit high. We need to change the diet. We need to exercise and do some of those things, which I don't feel like the health profession does well enough. I think the tendency is you go in, your blood pressure's high. Let's look at taking blood pressure medication. Oh, your cholesterol is high. Maybe we need to start looking at taking some cholesterol lowering drugs, rather than, look, your diet is crap. You are
quit
way
eating
overweight.
Bacon every
You're
day.
not doing anything physically. You need to be a little bit more active. And so owning our aging from a medical standpoint, I think, yes, we do need to seek out appropriate preventative care. We need to take preventative action. And, when we are sick, then, we got to be treated for that. But the goal in owning our aging is to be as less of a burden on society as we age as possible, and to be able to be maybe even a better contributor to society as we age, because
Right.
now you're retired, you got free time. Hey, there's, kids out there that need mentoring. There's, schools that could use help in, managing classes and doing things like that. There is things that you can do around your community to make you a still very productive member of society, rather than kind of that more historic view of retirement that you just kind of sit back in your rocking chair and, wait for the Grim Reaper to knock on the door.
Right. But correct me if I'm wrong, isn't there a difference between like being sick and going to see a doctor, and then thinking that you're sick and going to see a doctor? Because like you said, it could just be a simple lifestyle change. It could just be that mindset of, like you said, I got to get physically active. I got to get involved in something. I have to be a part of something greater than myself, and keep, just because I'm retired or I'm at the age to retire doesn't mean I retire from life. I can still live. I can still do stuff. I can still, now I have no excuse. Now I don't have to go to work for 8, 9, or however many hours a day. Now I can go to the gym. Now I can go on a hike. Now I can, I can focus on myself, my health, my nutrition. I can meal prep more because I have that time.
Well, I would say that, again, owning your aging does not begin at retirement either.
Right.
It begins really early on. I mean, okay, at what point in life are you going to start to think about aging? It's not going to be in your teens. In your 20s, maybe it should be a little bit. I mean, you could start, you get out of college, you get a job, or, you graduate high school, get a job. You should start at that point thinking about retirement. What am I going to put away financially so that when I do have kids, or when I do retire, I am in a financially better spot because I've done that. And there are people who don't make significant incomes that end up retiring much better than people that are making six-figure paychecks every month, because or not every month, but annually. Maybe even better than people. There are people making six figures a month that don't retire very well, because look at some of these NBA players that end up broke after a few years because they've blown all their money on just stupid stuff that's consumable and doesn't add to their wealth. But people who are owning their aging and putting away money for retirement, putting money away in savings, are going to accumulate much more, because that money, even in our constantly shifting economy, is going to ultimately put away a lot of money. And so financially, we can own our aging by just simply starting young to think about the fact that someday I'm going to be old and I need to be prepared for that.
Actually, that I was probably, I want to say mid to early 20s. And I was struggling, and I thought that was just what my generation, and then being a freshly college graduate, I just thought that was the thing. I was working 3 or 4 jobs at that time, and I was still struggling so much, especially trying to pay off my student loans and everything. And most of my friends, they were also struggling. And instead of living paycheck to paycheck, what I started to doing is I lucked out, and I ended up getting a job that only paid once a month versus every 2 weeks. And some people are like, what? That lucked out? Yeah, because I was able to take that full amount of money and just pay my bills right in the beginning. But part of the bills that I was, air quotes, decided that I was going to pay was my future self. And I never looked at it as, oh no, I'm putting money aside. Hey, this is a bill I have to pay. Mm-hmm. And whatever I was determining that I owed my future self, I just included it in the bills. And I went from having like no savings account. I think in my checking at that point, I only had, I think it was like $3.76 only. And I had so much debt. And then I pulled myself out of it, paid off my credit card, paid off my car, paid off everything. I have a good chunk of change in my checking account, and I have a really good savings account now. And just little tiny lifestyle decisions of, hey, I'm not just going to live paycheck to paycheck. I got to take care of the bills first. And one of those bills is simply paying it to my future self. That was just that little mindset changed everything for me.
Even that mindset of living paycheck to paycheck, again, that's one of those expectations that we falsely have as we are younger, or, as we're managing our way through life as we tend to age. We think we got to live, we are living paycheck to paycheck, but it's just like when we talk about, I don't have time to exercise. I don't have money to put into savings. Well, look at where you're spending that money. I mean, how many cars you see lined up at Starbucks and other coffee shops in the morning to get their $5 lattes.
Right.
It's like, and those are the same people that I can't pay my student loan, or I can't afford rent, or I can't afford this. And okay, look at the car you're driving. Look at the coffee you're drinking. Where are you spending your money? Part of owning your aging is doing the things when you are younger to have things socked away. You've mentioned before kind of certain aspects of health being put into a savings account, when we do things that improve our well-being and our health, we're kind of, in a sense, putting a deposit into our future self. And I think that is a component of own your aging, is, preparing for a better future by maybe sacrificing a little bit today.
Being active when you're younger carries forward when you're older. I mean, I don't think I'm that old, right? And I was really, really active when I was younger. I was definitely in my teenage years. I was involved in a lot of sports. Some of my friends weren't. They weren't really involved in the sports. And probably around their late 20s, early 30s, they decided, you know what, I'm going to make that change and I'm going to be active. I'm going to get a gym membership. And they started, and we've worked out together, but it's really weird how much more, even though we may be built physically around the same, it's like I have significantly more strength than them. And I don't know, it's just an interesting concept to me. And it's almost as if they're starting from literally nothing, kind of like a bank account. You're starting from literally nothing and just slowly building, while someone else who's starting with a little bit more in their bank account, they're able to build interest on what they set aside. It's interesting to me.
I think you're just choosing weaker friends.
That's probably what it is.
I just hang out with people that are weaker than me, so I feel stronger. But I know you have a point there. And we've talked, in previous podcasts about the idea of muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
That the earlier that we start resistance training and doing those activities, the more myonuclei we build up in the muscle that allow us to build more hypertrophy. But also, when we go in periods of inactivity, we can regain that much more effectively than somebody who starts much later in life. And so the earlier we become active, the better capacity we have in order to be able to put on muscle, to maintain cardiovascular health, and even flexibility and all those types of things. The sooner we start those, the easier it is to maintain it, rather than having to come back at a point in life and say, I gotta switch gears and I gotta start getting in shape. I gotta get healthy. Does that make sense?
No, that totally makes sense.
So we've kind of touched on a little bit about, what is successful aging. What do you think is not successful aging?
Like you said, we'll probably use this terminology in a future podcast, but the best way I can describe it is a term called default aging. And I don't think that's very successful at all. And we kind of mentioned it earlier here, where you just get in that mindset of, well, I'm getting old. It is what it is. I'm just going to accept it. But you don't really have to accept it. You can embrace the fact that you're getting older and that you have more life experiences, but you don't have to, like the metaphor you use, sit in the rocking chair and wait for the Grim Reaper to knock on your door. That doesn't have to be you. Yeah. And to have that mindset of, I can't do that, I'm too old, or my knees don't work as well as they once did, I'm getting old. Just saying it out loud, you're already putting that negative mindset in. And, I know I've mentioned this in several podcasts, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And start being positive about it. Hey, I'm getting older. Hey, I get to try this at this age. There's a lot of people out there that really embrace the fact that they're aging. I was just reading about this one lady. She got her doctorate's degree at the age of 93 just because she was interested in a subject and she wanted to do it. There's some bodybuilders that they didn't start their bodybuilding until the age of 67, 68, and then they're competing at a high age. That's awesome.
I don't plan on being an elite athlete until I'm well into my 80s.
Well, not with that attitude, you won't.
What do you mean with that attitude?
Oh, okay.
My goal is to I know I'm not going to be as competitive now. Maybe, against some in my 60s, but definitely by the time I'm 80, I am going to be able to maintain my level of activity and strength and fitness and things like that to just be able to kick any 80-year-old's butt. And, so I might become a power lifter, maybe a distance runner, a sprinter. I don't know. I can do most anything if I can maintain where I'm at right now relative to what other 80-year-olds are going to be like in 20 years. So that's the goal. So, yeah, and I think, when we talk about what is not successful aging, it's doing anything that is contrary to what is successful aging or aging well. It's, we spend a lot of time in our youth doing unhealthy behaviors, consuming excessive amounts of alcohol, not exercising, maybe, performing reckless behaviors, not getting enough sleep, and anything that is counterproductive towards building a healthier, stronger physicality, I guess.
So do you think with that mindset of what we kind of all go through in our youth, making poor decisions, do you think it's a combination of, that acronym FOMO, which is fear of missing out, that's why we're making these bad decisions, or we're coming in terms with ourselves. We're trying to figure out who we are. We're craving acceptance. We want to be accepted by others, our peers. And then something happens where we realize I don't need to do all that. I know who I am. I know what I'm about. I know what I need to do and who I need to focus on. It's either myself or my loved ones, and that's it. And maybe that's what aging well is about, is just recognizing, hey, I don't need to impress anyone. I don't need to put my body through, abuse by putting chemicals in it like alcohol or drugs. And I can just focus on the healthy aspect. I can focus on my mental health. I can focus on my physical health. I can focus on my nutritional health. I can focus on my emotional health by surrounding myself with good, positive people. I can put myself in spiritual health by, getting involved in something bigger than me. I think, I wish we could talk to young people right now and say, hey, knock it off. Stop making these bad decisions.
Stop being stupid.
Stop being stupid.
Yeah. I think it's a little bit of all that. I mean, it's stupidity. It's just, a sense of invincibility. There's a lot of things going on when we're younger. We just, your brains aren't fully developed until you're, I think, 25 or more. I think it's even into your 30s, but the brain is still kind of making some level of development. So, we are maturing in our decision-making processes, in our experiences and things like that. And maybe some of that is just the stuff we have to go through to find our purpose. And I think that is probably one of the biggest things to kind of owning your aging, is looking at, what is my significance in this society? What is my purpose? And understanding that we all have different purposes, and no one purpose is of greater magnitude than the other. I mean, sometimes we sit there thinking that, celebrities and, star athletes and all that stuff have it made. And in reality, they're not contributing any more in society than, person who fills your tank, the guy, the gas attendant at the station that you take your car to. We all have to look at what is our responsibility to society, and that's part of aging well.
So instead of FOMO, fear of missing out, we should coin the phrase FIPIL, which is find your purpose in life. FIPIL.
Okay. Good luck with that one.
I'm coining it right now, live on the Aging Well podcast. FIPIL. Find your purpose in life.
Let's see if that takes off. Another thing that, I've been thinking about with this topic, and it was just kind of timely that, this week as we're recording this, which is, weeks before this is actually going to be live and aired. But I like listening to Dr. Rob Gilbert's Success Hotline, and I'll leave a link to the number, and I think we've actually linked it in a previous podcast, but the link to the phone number that you can call daily, or it's also available on like Apple Podcasts where you can get the podcasts. They're pretty short, so it's pretty easy just to call them. I have it on my favorites on my iPhone. It's all family, and then Dr. Gilbert's Success Hotline, where you just call and you hear a recording, and it's usually anywhere from maybe 2 to 5 minutes long, having some inspirational message for the day. He's been doing it for like 30 years. And I was listening to episode 11,694. So that gives you an idea how many he's been doing. He's doing one of those per day. So divide 365 into 11,694. And you'll get an idea for how committed he has been to this and how long he's been doing it. But the title of that particular message was, How Do You Coach Yourself? And I'll be bringing this up in another future podcast, as it's kind of one of the central themes of my talk that I'm going to give to Sandy Griffin's 12-week transformation seminars that should be putting on. I believe I speak in early April.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Right. So with this, he talks about in a scale of 1 to 10, what did I do today that got my score close to 10? So you look at some aspect of your life, some activity, some goal that you have, score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 and ask, what did I do that got me close to that score of 10? Or what did I not do that would get my score closer to a 10? And so he talks about asking 3 questions: stop, start, continue. And so what can I stop doing now that had I not done today would have brought me closer to that score of a 10? What can I start doing today that would bring my score closer to that score of 10? And what am I doing that I should continue doing that helped keep that score where it was today? And so I think of that with aging. It's like on a daily basis, what are things that we can do to alter our present state and our pathway toward aging well? What do I need to stop doing today? If I'm drinking too much, can I stop doing that today? Or can I reduce the amount of alcohol that I'm consuming today to make myself healthier? Can I start exercising? Or can I start lifting weights? Or can I start maybe reading more or whatever? And look at what are the good things that I'm doing. Okay, yeah, I got a good workout in this morning. I'm going to continue to daily get up at this time and go work out. And so I think that is a really great approach to aging well. Looking at what are some of the things that we can do and what actions can we take to age well. So maybe we could talk a little bit about what are some of the actions that we can take to age well.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of stuck on the 1 through 10 process. I love that idea. I can't believe I've never heard of that, but the stop, start, and continue. I think that's really poetic, but it's also, it makes you aware of what you need to do. It kind of allows you to fully self-reflect, take control over the situation, and then readjust and assess accordingly in order to improve on all aspects of your life. And I don't know, I wish my younger version of myself could have heard this a long time ago. So I think that's pretty powerful stuff. As far as what we need to do is everything. It starts, it does. It starts with exercise, but not just exercise, but being honest with our exercise. We talk a lot on this podcast of the difference between being physically active and physically fit. There's a difference between exercise and physical activity, right? And a lot of people, especially those that started off not being physically active at all, they start, walking or being a little bit more active, and they think they're good, and they get really happy, and they get that original dopamine spike because they're like, yeah, I'm moving, I'm grooving, but then they don't see results. Well, you're not seeing results because you're not self-improving, and you have to constantly push yourself. You have to strive for that next level. If you're, going on a hike, you don't want to just stop midway on that hill. You want to make it all the way up to the summit to say, hey, I did it. That was a challenge, but I did it. What's the next thing? What's the next goal? What's the next challenge? How am I going to overcome that?
And I think as we age well, you look at something like that. Okay, what did I do on a scale when you initially start exercising, that taking that walk might be closer to a 10. But, a week later, a month later, that same walk should no longer be a 10. That should be moving us down. So as that score goes away from a 10, what do I need to stop? Well, I need to stop just walking this one course. I need to pick up my intensity a little bit more. I have to do something that is going to overload my muscular system or my cardiovascular system in order to make myself more fit. So I'm going to start now jogging.
Right.
I'm going to start running, or I'm going to start going to the gym and getting on a stair climber. Maybe I'm going to start weightlifting now because I feel a little bit more fit. I've lost some weight. Now I feel more comfortable lifting weight. What am I going to continue doing? I'm going to continue maybe doing that walk because I enjoy it and it's given me some good physical activity. And that's also going to help me to burn more calories. Or I can continue setting aside that 45 minutes out of the day that I was using to walk for exercise.
Yeah. I think the number one, so I think exercise and physical activity is going to be the number one choice. I think number two, which is also something we need to start, stop, or continue, is going to be our diet. Everything that we put into our body is either going to be used as a fuel source, or it can hinder us from a lot of things, whether that's sleep, our mind, our overall health. It's, and I think we need to have a real hard, tough love self-talk with our own individuality and say, okay, am I really eating as healthy as I think I am? Let's take a look at this. I need to stop eating these sweets, or I need to stop drinking so much alcohol, or I need to stop putting 6 ounces of creamer inside of my coffee because it's just
6 ounces of creamer.
I don't know. I'm just making something up.
It's like put some coffee in your creamer.
Right. Yeah, but you mentioned the Starbucks people, and you see them in line, and they go to Starbucks, and then they get this drink that's essentially all creamer with a little coffee in it. And what? You can't even get a caffeine buzz off that. It doesn't make sense.
I don't think it's quite that bad in some of those lattes. It's just so many excess calories. But I think you're right with, what can we do to age well? After exercise and increasing our physical activity, we also have to consider our diet. And actually, if our body composition is out of kilter, if we have too much body fat, really diet is the priority, because exercise has been shown to not really affect body fat as much as we tend to think it is. So I got a lot of people that they don't focus on what they're eating, but they go to the gym and they burn a bunch of calories on the treadmill, but then they get off and then they go have that 500 calorie latte after their workout. So focusing in on what we can do diet wise, again, we can apply that. Rate our diet for the day of a scale of 1 to 10. What do I need to start, stop, and continue? But it's small changes.
Right.
What are the little changes that I can make today, and then maintain that change over the course of the year, and then every day adding a little bit more change. You add just a few calories of physical activity, that's going to have a positive effect.
Right.
You take away a few calories out of your diet by maybe putting less cream in your coffee, or putting less butter on a piece of bread, or cutting something that is unhealthy. Maybe switching from sugar to a calorie-free substitute. You look at something as simple as drinking a diet pop instead of a sugared pop. That's like 260 calories. Now, drinking pop is probably not healthy either, but that initial change, dropping 260 calories, and you're doing that over the course of 365 days, that's going to have a huge, huge effect. And then once you get used to, not drinking the sugared pop, then you can start saying, okay, well, I'm going to start drinking more water, or I'm going to, and to get to the water, it might mean, shifting to, drinking water with some of those little squirts in it, the flavors that'll give some taste to the water. Because I hate drinking just plain water. Very rarely, other than probably at restaurants, do I ever want to sit down and have a glass of ice water. But I do need to hydrate more. And so I do drink a lot more fluid, but I put some of those little flavors into them.
I got into drinking club soda. I don't know.
Well, I'd say
it's just the fizziness.
Yeah, but that isn't any better than drinking pop, really, because that carbonation is adding, things that are going to have negative effects. I think it's like magnesium that is affected by some of that carbonation. Totally. Yeah. And, again, it might be a step to getting you away from pop. And then, you take another baby step. But every day, just evaluating what have I done well, and, pat yourself on the back for that. What are the successes for the day? What are the things that I could be a little bit more successful in if I stop doing these activities? And then what do I need to do tomorrow to make myself move toward a more successful aging?
Well, for me, I think it was like a really the club soda and stuff. That was just to that was my mindset to not drink, like period. But you still, if you're socializing with your friends or you're watching a sporting event, even if you get that craving for a beer, that club soda, right? Because it's in a can, you still get somewhat of a fizz. So you kind of feel like you're participating. And eventually it just no desire for any adult beverages. It just kind of weaned yourself off of it. I don't know. It's kind of silly, but it was the baby step needed to kind of say, nope, I'm good, guys. I think number 3 would probably be sleep. Would you agree in that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd put numbers on any of this because, again, everybody is at a different place, and we have to evaluate, again, our overall aging and our overall activities. What are we doing? What are the things that we need to continue doing? So for some people, they might be maybe they're getting too much sleep.
Right, that's a good point. Yeah.
So I need to sleep a little bit less, or I'm getting in bed. I'm in bed 8 hours a night, but I'm not sleeping well. I'm not doing the things that are helping me sleep. So maybe I need to stop getting on my iPhone right before sleep or stop watching TV for a half hour right before bed. Maybe I need to start reading, at bedtime so that it helps me to kind of fall asleep. Maybe I need to stop drinking a gallon of water before bed because I'm getting up and having to pee 5 times at night. It's what do we need to do to improve the quality of our sleep and to maintain that, again, further as we age.
Yeah, I haven't really mastered that yet. I think falling asleep is really easy for me. As soon as my head hits the pillow, I'm out. Actually, kudos to you. I actually, being a part of this podcast and you talking about your bedtime, kind of changed my mindset. I was like, well, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should start getting a bedtime. And I have a bedtime now. I may not always fall asleep right away at that bedtime, but I'm definitely in bed by that bedtime. And it kind of just, that's now my routine. Thanks, Dr. Armstrong.
Well, good. I think as you have that routine too, it begins to kind of sync up your cycles, so that that circadian rhythm, so that your body is used to going to sleep at a particular time.
Yeah. I think for me, it's harder to wake up. It's not necessarily going to sleep. Going to sleep for me is easy. It's the waking up in the morning that I'm just like, there's got to be something it can't be this much of a challenge. There's so many people out there that when that alarm goes off, boom, they're ready. They're out. Yep, I'm up. I'm ready to go. It's not haven't mastered that art yet.
It comes. I mean, I'm so habitual and when I get up that it's hard to sleep in on some days. And there are days that I'm trying to sleep in a little bit more to get a little bit better recovery because I've been working out a little bit more intensely.
Mm-hmm.
And, just the type of workouts I've been doing, I've kind of taken a break from morning workouts so that I can lift a little heavier in the afternoons. But that's going to change again as I get back to doing strength conditioning with the wrestling team again after we take a little break. I'm going to have my afternoons will be tied up, so I'm going to have to do it in the morning again. But, I'm going to enjoy those mornings a little bit as I can.
Right. Now, I don't know. I feel like we can just keep talking about these subjects forever and ever and ever. We, exercise, nutrition, sleep, social involvement. I think we can keep doing that. We can figure out what we need to do to stop, start, or continue. But I don't know what would be the overall actions that need to take place to age well.
Well, let's not quit too soon on the discussion because I think there's a lot of things that we can encourage people to do to age well. And we haven't talked about all of those. I think obviously one of the big things is just simply monitoring our healthy and unhealthy behavior. Those are things that, we all have our unhealthy behaviors. And we have the healthy things that we're doing, and we need to be continuing those. So putting those on that scale of 1 to 10 and monitoring those appropriately, I think are really good. And from that, we need to set goals. What goals do we have to successfully age? And that's going to be different for everybody. You come into retirement. Okay, now I have the time to do some of the things I've always wanted to do. I want to learn how to cross-country ski or, downhill ski, which I'm not about to downhill ski as I get older because I'll just hurt myself. But, set goals. What are the things that you want to do? A lot of people have a bucket list. And sometimes that bucket list doesn't really even get touched until they get into retirement. But people who have goals and set goals for their future selves are going to be much more successful in aging. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, I would definitely agree. And I think one of our podcasts, I believe the gentleman's name was Coit
Cooper.
Yeah, he talked about. We've all heard SMART goals, right? And he kind of discussed the I SMART. Right. Really, like just that little bit of I can do this. That mindset, it's way different than, well, this is my goal. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. So
but saying I will accomplish this, I will get to this goal. It's, and I personally, when I set my SMART goals, I call them SMART T with an E at the end. And I use that E as evaluate. Right? I'm going to reflect. I'm not reaching this goal. What am I doing different? And how do I tweak it so I can get there? And
I think that's a good segue into the idea of journaling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of people don't journal. I think that's a very important part of my process in aging well, is getting up every morning and spending just a little bit of time writing out some basic goals, or, and I like to do goals in each of the well-centered components, so spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social, but also reflecting on my mission statement, my values, things that happened the previous day or that I want to happen or will happen during the current day. And so just getting your mind wrapped around, a bit more of what Coit Cooper would call a growth mindset.
Right.
And if we journal into our aging process, I think we are better at setting kind of our path, our course forward, rather than just kind of waking up and seeing what the day is going to bring to us.
I recently kind of got into journaling, not really, but what's also cool, what I've learned about it is, even though I'm fairly new, it's only been a couple months, I would say, it's weird how much my mindset has changed from even a few months ago to where it's at now. And I think that's a really cool process, because I think that's part of the growth. That's part of the maturing process. That's part of aging well. If you can literally see yourself growing, because I don't know, I don't think we should have the same mindset that we once had when we were in college. If you look at a college paper and at the time you were like, yeah, I did a lot of work. This was, I killed it. I crushed it. And then you are cleaning out your closet and you just so happen to find that same article and you read it and you're like, this was garbage. I don't know. You shouldn't have the same mindset that you once had. We should always be improving and always striving to be a better version of ourselves.
I would phrase it more as you need to refine your mindset, refine your worldview. It should always become bigger rather than, totally changing it. Because, I would somewhat disagree about reading some of those, papers. I still have the paper I wrote in college about the tragedy of the commons. I still have that article. And, my values from that have not really changed dramatically. They've maybe become a bit more refined, and I've begun to apply that in more situations than just what we talked about in that class in the early 80s. I was just this past week, went back, I kind of reconnected on LinkedIn with, I don't know if you went to school with Brad Pankey or not. He graduated about 15 years ago. So you might have been in the program about the same time, but not necessarily had the same classes. But in 2018, Brad had a podcast called the Modern Masculinity Project, and he would interview different individuals, and they were actually pretty long but intensive, really deep discussion interviews. And just, I kind of reconnected with him in these past couple of weeks, and I said, I'm going to go back. I want to re-listen to our interview. And it's about a 3-hour interview. So I've been listening to it over the course of the last couple of days in my commute. And there was so much in it that it's like, wow, I would still say the same thing today. And then there's other things that I've refined that a little bit, I've grown. But it was kind of interesting how consistent my values have remained, and how, a lot of the stories that I tell, I've been telling for years. And, some of it he was talking about, wrestling, and that was, 5 years ago. So Liam was in middle school, and now, he's just wrestled his last high school match. And it was kind of interesting to just think about, some of my approaches. And, one of the things that he had asked me was, for Liam, he was like, what is your biggest fear for your son? I said, that he would be afraid to do what he is capable of doing. And it's like, that's still very much what I would want for him. And in fact, I came home, after hearing that, driving home, and he got home about the same time I did. And I said, I was just listening to this, and I want to remind you. And I talked to him about that. And we talked about, going forward, because he's going, getting ready to go off to college next year. And so I don't think our mindsets have to change dramatically. We just need to have a growth mindset, and we need to have a growing understanding of how insignificant we are in the world, and yet how significant we are in the world. There's that bit of a dichotomy in there. We're not the center of the universe, but everything we do has an impact on the universe.
Wow. That's good.
So all that came from journaling. Let's see. What else, you think we need to really focus on? I think, we've talked enough about diet, health, and exercise. Body composition is obviously pretty important. We can always keep refining that, and that comes back to diet. We've talked in previous podcasts about exercising the brain so that we can kind of delay and possibly even prevent the risk of dementia and other cognitive declines as we age. So that might just be a matter of, okay, I read a book this month. Mm-hmm. Next month, I'm going to read 2 books, and I'm going to read 3 books. And, just set goals in terms of what we're going to read, what kind of information, evaluate what's the information we're putting in our head. Are you getting all of your news from Facebook or Twitter? Where else can we get some of this information? It's funny. I've had conversations with my wife recently where she'd say, I read this article on diabetes, because we're dealing with the cat has diabetes. And we also have some concerns, for my daughter with possibilities of, maybe having some pre-diabetic conditions. And, I said, was it a article, or was it a journal article, or was it just some popular press article? Oh, well, yeah. And now she started to kind of shift her mindset. The other day, as we were doing our 15-minute check-in, she was telling me, like, do you know that you can, Google can, link you to scientific articles? I said, yeah, that's called Google Scholar. It's been around for a long time. She thought it was this new feature that Google had. I was like, no, it's been around for a long time. But she's changed her mindset now, where rather than just getting information from a secondary source, she's going to the primary sources, which I think a lot of people really need to do, rather than, oh, yeah, I saw on CNN that, if you drink a glass of wine a day, it's going to be like going to the gym. I don't know if that was CNN that actually presented that, but I remember a number of years ago, I saw that. And
I think we did a podcast on it after.
We talked a little bit about it. But, so not only exercising the brain, doing things like, playing mind games and things like that are going to help stimulate the brain and help offset some of these risks of cognitive disorders, but also exercise the brain, grow your intelligence. Go for, you're in your 90s and you have the time and the resources to get a PhD. Why not?
Right.
Do it. And you don't have to go back to school to get an education. There's this thing, I don't know if you've ever heard of libraries.
I have heard of libraries.
Your generation doesn't go to libraries.
Well, I used to. Well, back in the 90s. That's my mom actually used to take me to the library all the time. It was super cool. I had my own little library card. We lived right next to, it was the old Beaverton Library. The new Beaverton Library is basically in downtown Beaverton. It's this massive thing. But the old one was just this tiny, real small brown building. And yeah, used to just walk there, and a lot of fun. The library it's like a whole nother world. Actually, recently, my grandpa just turned 89, and we just celebrated his birthday. And I went into a bookstore and I bought him some books for as a birthday present, a whole bunch of Westerns, and it was really interesting how that bookstore has books from like the late 1800s, early 1900s, as well as things that were written in 2022. I love the variety of stuff.
I love the old stuff. And, some of it's pretty easy to get even just on Amazon.
Right.
Like I like to read a lot of Orson Swett Martin, James Allen, some of the Zig Ziglars of their day, and very profound thinkers, very profound writing. And it has shaped a lot of my life philosophies and things like that. But, reading is, as I used to say when I was, in school, reading is fundamental.
Right.
I don't know if you had those commercials when you were a youngster, but back in my day.
No, I think we did, because Saturday morning cartoons had the Schoolhouse Rock.
Oh, yeah.
Still around. So, yeah, reading was fundamental. Plus, there was a huge, being in elementary school in the 90s, there was a huge push for reading. We had book fairs. We had, we had challenges. Who could read the most books in a month, and what books were you reading? And there was a huge book boom actually in the 90s. I remember they had the Animorphs, they had Goosebumps, which I know they're little kid books, but it was better than not reading anything. But then on top of that, there were books that were being suggested, like Tuck Everlasting and all the Pioneer. Oh my gosh, I can't even think. There's a whole bunch of where kids were we were just grabbing books and reading them. And I remember being on the playground and people were reading books, and then we start talking about these characters that are fictional characters in the book as if they're real characters, and we're like, man, this guy's so cool. Yeah,
we used to act out a lot of those books. I remember playing Johnny Tremaine with friend Doug Mamet when I was a kid. He had these like little cap gun revolutionary muskets, that they actually shot little cork balls, but they wouldn't go far. It was just like one little cap that would pop it, and it would go out about 3 feet. But, we used to play a lot of that kind of stuff. And, I think we were fed a lot more books back then, and it's a lot harder for people now to engage in books because we have the, instant gratification that comes from downstreaming, programs.
Right.
And, I'm fortunate. My son is very much into reading. And I came home yesterday. He's like talking to me about something he's reading in school and just the different concepts and the allegories and the different stuff. And it's kind of this really deep conversation. Of course, I had to get to my work on stuff too. And I'm like, I'm enjoying this. I really, like, having this conversation about the reading, but my time's ticking away. I got to get down into the garage and work out. And, so it's like, I appreciate having that balance in myself where, there's the intellectual side, but then there's also the physical side. And I appreciate that, my wrestling son who, likes to lift weights, very, physical and everything, also enjoys books.
Yeah.
He enjoys them so much that we're almost trying to talk him out of getting an English degree in college, because like, dude, what are you going to do with that for a career? But
well, you talked about how there's a physical and then there's an intellectual, and then there's, we've talked about a fiscal, right? Your financial stuff, but there's also a social aspect as well. And I think surrounding yourself in a network of individuals that you can either grow from or learn from, or just overall, they're just positive people. I think that has a huge significance on your emotional, your mental health, which translates into your physical health, which can also translate into your diet or your sleep. Because if you're feeling good, you want to, that affects all aspects of your life. And I think that also, I think it's a very well-known thing to say, hey, show me your friends and I'll tell you what kind of person you are, or surround yourself with positive people. It does have an effect on us, but for some reason, it's kind of hard, especially if you've established these relationships with these friends or family or whatever the case may be. And there may be toxicity there, and you may ignore those red flags because you've built that relationship. And so one can easily say, hey, just cut ties with these individuals. But for some reason, it's so hard for us to do that because of that emotional connection, even though if we follow the guidelines of stop, start, continue, maybe we could self-reflect and say, hey, I need to stop hanging out with this individual for the time being. I need to continue to focus on myself. And maybe I should start hanging out with this person over here because they kind of have their life together. Kind of, speaking of books, kind of like the book Poor Dad, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? He loved his dad, but his dad had that mindset of a poor man's mentality. So he took on this mentor who raised him to be, having that rich, and he kind of combined the two mindsets together, where you could be cutthroat and ruthless, but you can also be loving and caring. And you can, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it all ties in. Physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, everything ties in together.
Yeah, I think, a big part of owning your aging is owning your relationships. And, we mentioned Jim Harshaw. He has his environment of excellence, and I probably mentioned that before, where you put yourself with people who are going to help propel you towards your goals and help you manage your successes and failures to, in our case, age well. One of my favorite quotes from Jim Rohn is, you are the average of 5 people you spend the most time with.
Mm.
And so, again, going back to that start, stop, continue, evaluate every relationship you have. Is this a relationship that is productive towards my successful aging? If not, then, you don't necessarily have to sever ties with that individual, but spend less time with them, or manage how you spend time with them, or the circumstances in which you spend time. If there is somebody who you find very beneficial, and if it's somebody you don't even know, how do I build that relationship? How do I connect with this individual? I've had the opportunity to connect with a lot of people I don't even know on Facebook and LinkedIn. So some of these social media tools where somebody has recommended to me, hey, you need to talk to so-and-so. We mentioned Sandy Griffin earlier. I have not met Sandy face-to-face, but we have built a very strong friendship and professional relationship because I had a friend and former student years ago who knew her when she was in Germany and said, you need to meet this person. You need to connect with this person. And so, just through Facebook and, I think to a certain extent, maybe LinkedIn, we've gotten to be pretty good friends. And, we've had conversations where, we've interviewed her on the podcast. She's had me speak to her group several times. And so you seek out those people who are going to benefit you. And it seems selfish, and maybe to a degree it is, but it's not selfish if you're looking at it as, I'm getting something from this person so that I become a better person so that I can contribute more to the circles that I interact with.
Right.
And so I think, healthy relationships is hugely important. And then also, along that same vein is developing our practices for spiritual well-being. Whether that is, I need to start going to church again, or, if you're not a churchgoer, I'm giving back to my community in a way so that I am practicing what I call other-centeredness, where you are not centered on self, but you are centered on how you, through your purpose, or how you're attaining your purpose by interacting and helping other people, and looking at the circumstances that I'm going through in this moment may not necessarily benefit me, but they are benefiting someone else. So my suffering might be something that is for the benefit of others.
That's good.
So any other areas that we haven't really touched on? We talked about setting goals and monitoring unhealthy behavior, what some of those healthy behaviors might be. We've encouraged people to read more and read more widely, to exercise the brain, to engage ourselves spiritually, physically, intellectually, emotionally, and socially. Anything else that you would add to help somebody who is listening to this own their own aging and to age well?
The only thing I would add is don't stop. Continue to grow, continue to strive, and don't accept defeat. Just because you're aging, just because you're getting older, doesn't mean you have to accept it. You can continue to grow, and you can continue to blossom, and you can continue to not only shock others around you or shock the world, but you can shock yourself, because if you have something in your mind and in your heart, you can accomplish anything. You just have to want it.
I think we're going kind of full circle to Jim Harshaw's own your failures. Learn from your mistakes and grow, and, don't dwell in the past, live in the present so that you have a better future so that you can age well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast, and until next time, keep aging well. If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers.